today I want to go back over my plan for a balanced budget to start paying off the national debt. Um, and plain and simple, we get to Washington. You put me in Washington in the Senate, and we get this accomplished. It's going to completely eliminate and nullify the Democratic Party. That's not my goal to do so. I'm not trying to do that, but it just will. And through the course of the video here, you're going to understand how it's going to do it. But with the budget to begin with, we're over $20 trillion in debt. I've heard since the 70s we keep kicking the debt problem down the road. Nobody right now in this current midterm cycle is talking about even a balanced budget, let alone anything else. I've never ever heard a politician even talk about paying off the national debt. The way politicians talk about doing things is balancing the budget, which means bringing the government expenditures down level with the government income. So then somebody down the road who sets it out of balance again starts increasing the national debt. My focus is to create a revenue stream for the federal government that will create a surplus, bring down the federal budget, and create a different revenue stream. How we're going to do this is it's really simple, okay? The first 130 years of this country's existence, we didn't have income tax. So how did the government operate? Well, they operated off a consumption tax tariff, what they called a tariff. All it was a consumption tax. Now, I've never been able to confirm the amount, but a friend of mine who was talking to me about this several years ago said that it was a 23% tariff. In other words, back in the Old West, when you paid a dollar for something, 23 cents of that dollar went to the government. And the business kept the other 77%. Now, I don't propose a 23% tariff. All right. So what my plan is, I'm calling it a consumption tax. But what we're going to do is we're going to eliminate federal income tax first. Completely wipe the tax code off the map. Just get rid of it. No individuals will have to pay federal income tax. That means when you get your paycheck every week, your paycheck will no longer have a deduction that goes to the federal government. There will be a 5% Social Security Medicare tax, not 5% for each, just a 5% total. So let's say, for example, you make $500 a week, then $25 will be subtracted out of your paycheck to go to Social Security Medicare, etc., etc. Okay? For Social Security Medicare, we'll talk about that in another video. All right, but the rest of your money, minus state and stuff like that, benefits, whatever, is yours. We're no longer going to take money out of your paycheck for the federal government. Businesses, there'll be a 0% corporate tax rate in this country. We will not receive any income from taxes, federal taxes, income taxes, like it is today. What that's going to do is currently the federal government receives about $3 trillion, just over $3 trillion a year in federal income tax. That's the operating budget. That's all the government has to spend. Now, this recent tax bill that the Republicans passed, everybody's throwing a fit. Oh, they're cutting $1.5 trillion out of the national, it's not $1.5 trillion, folks. The way the government talks about everything, politicians tell you stuff that, it's $1 trillion, that's the total over 10 years. They look at everything in 10-year increments. So if it's $1.5 trillion in 10 years, that means it's only $150 billion a year. Now, when you're talking the kind of money the government deals with, $150 billion is not that much. And but we're talking about just doing away with taxes altogether. That way, you get all of your money back in your pocket. Now, of course, you say, well, the government's got to have an income stream. Yes. We're going to implement a 20% consumption tax. That means all goods and services sold in the United States will have a 20% tax to them. What that does is that almost balances the budget right off the bat. Eliminating federal income taxes puts $3 trillion per year, leaves $3 trillion per year in the economy. Now, we've already seen how things with just a tax cut he did. Imagine if we eliminated taxes altogether. Now, of course, the liberals are going to go, businesses will keep the money. Well, it's their money. Honestly, I don't care what business does with it. But plain and simple, when you put that money back in businesses' pockets, they're going to grow their business. That's why they're in business. If they have that money, get to keep that money, and they can use that money to increase the size of their business, it increases profits. With money, $3 trillion in the economy, that means a growth spurt of buying, which means businesses will have to grow to keep up with demand. It's also going to create the greatest incentive for businesses to return to the United States and bring their manufacturing back into the United States. It's going to create the most appealing incentive in the world for foreign companies to invest into the United States. Zero corporate tax rate. They ain't going to have to pay any taxes on money that they earn in the States. Okay? So it's going to create a boom. President Trump's and the Republicans' tax plan has lit a fire in the economy. I believe this will make it explode. Okay? So the economy is going to grow at exponential rates. Personally, I would like to see a 5% GDP rate and a consistent, steady 5%. Don't know if that's achievable. Worth a try. With the corporate tax cuts, with the federal income tax decreasing, eliminating, it also helps us to eliminate some stuff in the government. For example, the IRS. Now, we're not going to be able to eliminate the IRS. The IRS is still going to have personnel in each state to monitor and double check the figures to make sure the right amount of money is being transferred to the federal treasury and for that purposes. There's still going to be people's going to have to be tax exempt. For example, like body shops. When they purchase a part to repair your car with, they're tax exempt right now. So you're going to have people monitoring, make sure those people are being taken care of, stuff like that. By implementing the 20% federal sales tax or consumption tax, what that means is 20% of the GDP is now going to go to the government. Well, the current GDP is a little over $18.6 trillion. That leads to a $3.7 trillion revenue stream to the federal government. All right, just in that one move, we've added over $500 billion to the government's revenue stream. At the current expenditures of the government's currently expending about 3.9 trillion as of right now. Okay, so without doing anything, we've almost balanced the budget. The other part of balancing the budget is complete restructuring of the federal government, doing a bottoms-up overall evaluation of each and every single department in the government, eliminating the redundancy. All right, there's 16 or 17 intelligence agencies in the United States government. Why? It's ridiculous. We don't need 16, 17 different agencies collecting intelligence. All right, what we're going to do, and I'm not picking on the intelligence community. I just using them as an example. Okay, don't want to get upset at me. But what it is it's different parts, and I've heard this for several years, that there's the redundancy in the government. There'll be two different departments that's basically doing the same job, or they're overlapping. So what we're going to do in the evaluation of the federal government is we're going to determine, when we have those overlaps, which department should be responsible for that job. Then we're going to combine the jobs under that one department. That's also going to cause a personnel cut. Because if, like, say, this department uses 50 people to do this job, this department uses 50 people to do that job, when you combine them together under one department, it doesn't take 100 people to do that job under the one department. It will take more than 50, but it won't take the whole 100. So you'll be able to scale down the personnel. Scaling down the IRS has almost 100,000 people right now. Under the plans with the consumption tax, I believe we should be able to get by with maybe 20,000 IRS agents at the most nationwide for those purposes. So there's a huge decrease. Now, how we're going to restructure the government, we're going to set up a table of organization equipment, similar to like what we have in the military. What this consists of, and I'm going to use the FBI here because everybody can understand when I use the FBI, I can explain the structuring better. What we'll do is, with the FBI, ATF, everybody, is we'll sit down first of all and determine how many field offices do they have to do their job based off the way they're assigned and developed and originally set out to be done. Once we have that number, then we got to sit down and say, okay, how many investigative teams does each office have to have? Now, first of all, we got to determine what an investigative team would comprise of. A team leader, 2, 3, 4 team members. Okay? Once we've done that, then we sit down and decide how many teams each office has to have. Then you also have a agent in charge of the office, a deputy agent in charge of the office. You have a state office who's in charge of all of the offices, field offices in the state. Then you would have a regional, which would be in charge of all the different states, for example, like the Northeast, the Southeast, the Midwest, etc., etc. And then you go straight to the headquarters of FBI. Once you've established this table of organization, kind of like a chain of command, then you sit down and say, okay, what equipment do these people need? What firearms, what cars, trucks, etc. Once you've established all that, that's exactly the way the military is. It's a very simple, easy system, and during people leaving the military, new recruits coming in, people being promoted to new ranks, that's how the military determines how many people they need to promote, how many people they need to recruit to fill in these empty gaps based off of the table of organization equipment. When they go to procure equipment, we have so many rifles that have been that are out of date. They're used up. We need to replace them. They know how many rifles they have to have, how many pistols, how many mortars, how many tanks, planes. All of that stuff is based off the table of organization. So if we take that concept and apply it to each and every single department in the government, then I believe we can take the government and shrink the personnel, reorganize the government into a more organized chain of command organization, kind of being a little redundant in my words, but it will operate more efficiently, it'll be a little bit smaller, and it will be more cost effective. Okay? Now, there's a lot of other things that has to be figured out budget-wise with the government, but that's the basic concept. Each department will do that. And each department will then, and once you get all of these departments organized this way, then you combine all of their budgets, and boom, there's the federal budget. Okay? Now, I know politicians are going to go, he said it, but it's that simple. It really, really is. You just have to apply it. But more importantly, you have to have somebody willing to put it out there and put it forward and then gain backing behind of it. And I believe President Trump will 100% back this plan, because that's what we put him in office for, was to shrink the government, make it more efficient, and it kind of is like a business in that way too. Okay? So, now, that is also going to address a couple other problems. The VA. Since the VA is a part of the government, then the reorganization of the government by department is going to do the same thing with the VA. The VA will be evaluated on its table of organization exactly the same way. That's where we can put people in place. We can make sure we have the correct facilities. We can put the people in place that would be beneficial to the care of the veterans. And I explain that in how this is all going to work for the VA in my video for the VA. Also with Social Security and Medicare, their government operations, they will also be reorganized and reevaluated under the restructuring of the government. So this restructuring is actually going to not necessarily fix several of the problems at the same time, but it will begin the repairs to the problems that we have. Because by reorganizing, you are now setting up an ability to have a more efficient evaluation, and you can also cut out a tremendous amount of waste, fraud, and abuse. Once that budget is adapted, we have our income, we have our budget, now we have a determination of our surplus. My feelings is that this program, first year out, will create at least a $500 billion surplus, $500 billion in leftover money after the budget's paid. Now, this is also going to create a situation where there's no more government shutdowns. All of this little haggling we've been doing is going to eliminate, because each department will have to have their budgets into the Congress by August 1st. That gives Congress 90 days to go through and evaluate. And when I say their budget, that means for the next fiscal year. We'll go through and evaluate each budget to see if there's anything we have questions on. We can call those department heads in and question them about whether we're willing to approve or disapprove or whatever. Gives us 90 days before the budget has to be implemented. Therefore, we can do all the haggling and stuff that needs to be done. The budget can be passed on the president's desk to be signed prior to October 1st, which is the beginning of the fiscal year. The budget will no longer be done on a piecemeal basis like they're doing right now to fund the government for a week or 2 weeks or a month or 2 months. The budget will be for the entire fiscal year. This is what we need because we have the money. You understand? We've got the money now, so we don't have to haggle about this stupid crap anymore. And once the budget's passed October 1st, that's it until next year. Done. Over with. Alright? Balanced budget. No more freaking government shutdowns. Social Security will be funded to make sure that everybody is taken care of. Right now, I keep hearing this horse manure about how the Social Security is fixing to run out of money in 15, 20 years. By the time I go to get on it. Or by the time my daughter, my kids are old enough for Social Security, it ain't going to be here. Under this plan, it will be. It'll be here till my great-grandchildren are eligible for Social Security. Okay? And folks, that's what this is all about. It's about making sure we have an established, balanced budget that will fund this government and take care of our great-grandchildren as long as people after us continue fiscal responsibility. Unfortunately, we can't predict that. Now, paying off the national debt. Very simple. We've got a $500 billion surplus, right? In the new tax laws, in the new laws with the consumption tax and everything, every year it will be mandated by law that a minimum of 50% of every surplus will first go to pay on the national debt. Now, the interest that's paid on the national debt annually is already figured in the federal budget. So now what this is we're actually paying off the principal. Instead of increasing the $21 trillion, we're going to decrease the $20 trillion. All right. Now, a great thing about the consumption part is this. As the GDP grows, so does the government's revenue stream. That means when the GDP hits $20 trillion, the government's revenue stream is going to be $4 trillion. All right, you cannot raise taxes high enough to give the government a $4 trillion revenue stream. Not unless you basically tax every single person 90% of their paychecks and no deductions. You just, every payday, take 90% of everybody's paychecks, give them 10%, and then therefore nobody receives anything but 10 cents out of every dollar they earn, and the government gets the other 90. At that point, we can be close to $4 trillion. I don't even think that'll make $4 trillion. Okay? But here we are, we're talking about under the consumption tax, as the GDP increases, so does the government's revenue stream. When the GDP hits $25 trillion, the government's revenue stream will be $5 trillion. If we maintain our fiscal responsibility, keeping the government's budget down under the plans that I've set in place, then the amount of surplus will increase every year, which means the amount of money we put onto the national debt will increase with the government's revenue stream. My feeling is that within 25 to 30 years, the United States will be out of debt. Now I want you to tell me something. Have you ever heard of a politician talk about putting the government out of debt? Never. Not in my lifetime. Okay? And that tells you right now, this is why I want to go to Washington. It ain't got nothing to do about trying to become a freaking politician. It's about doing what's right for the country, folks. That's why I need your help and support, because without you, I can't do this. Now back onto the national debt. There's one other thing in the budget that I want to implement, and that's a rainy day fund, emergency management fund. Okay? I believe it needs to be $500 billion. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the first few years, we're going to take half the surplus and put it on the national debt. The other half will go into the emergency fund. And each year we will do that until we get the fund to $500 billion. That's for stuff like happened last year. Oh my gosh. FEMA ran out of money. We had to keep borrowing money to pay for hurricane recovery. You had 3 major storms last year. My plan. I sat down a couple years ago and come up with this idea. And what I did was I took Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Andrew, and Superstorm Sandy. I looked up the total cost, what those things cost, added them together, and it come up to like a little over $350 billion is what the 3 of them combined did. So I figured a $500 billion emergency fund would be the perfect amount of money to cover this. Now this isn't just to go in and to cover the immediate reactions once the storm has passed, getting people to safety, all that kind of stuff. I'm talking about, this is about recovery. We want to put enough money in there that we can spend to actually rebuild afterwards. Put people back in their homes. Give them new homes, new cars, whatever they lost. Refurbish them for this. Take care of the people that's been damaged. Okay? That's what this fund is all about. Now, on the surplus side, once we have the $50 billion for the emergency fund, then what we'll do is every year after that, we will look at how much did we spend of that last year. Well, let's say, for example, we spent $150 billion. This particular year, we have a $750 billion surplus. So we're going to take 150 of that surplus and put it to reconstitute the emergency fund back up to 500. That leaves us $600 billion in surplus. So now we put the whole $600 billion in, not just at the half. 750 surplus would have been like $375 billion. Okay? We're going to put the whole surplus in after we've reconstituted the emergency fund. Reconstituting the emergency fund will never be done if the amount needed exceeds 50% of the surplus. 50% of the surplus will always go to the national debt. And the rest will go to the emergency fund as needed until we have, like I said. So the more we can put into the emergency, the national debt, the quicker we can pay it off. Now, another great thing about this is this kind of helps bring down the federal budget, because every year we pay on the federal debt, it decreases the interest rate that the federal budget that consumes part of the federal budget. As we decrease the debt, so does the interest. Therefore, that frees up more money in the federal budget. Okay, so which increases the surplus a little bit. Of course, over the next 25 to 30 years, prices are going to increase. The budget's going to increase from $3 trillion. It's going to go up. Okay, because prices go up. And I believe though that the decrease of the interest on the debt will help sort of offset to an extent the increase of pricing every year. People's going to say, well, what about projects and this and that and the other? Well, we can take a section of the surplus, say 10% or 15% of the surplus, after the debt's paid, and set it aside for Congress to use for pet projects. Bridges, roads, construction of some sort in their districts or hometowns. And that's something that can be done a little different each year. But the concept is, first of all, balance the budget, pay off the national debt. Now, let's get to the point I said about destroying the Democratic Party. I want you to think ahead till 2020. In 2018, the people of Ohio has elected me as their senator to the United States, to Washington. We go in there, and in 2019, this is the first thing I want to do. The first year I'm in office, this is the primary goal. President Trump and I get together, and we make this happen. So 2020 will be the first year of no taxes, balanced budget, etc., etc. I want somebody to explain to me what the Democrats are going to run against President Trump on. We just balanced the budget. We just gave all your money back to you. We are now starting to pay off the national debt. Can someone please explain to me what the Democrats will run on? What kind of a platform can they run on to try to beat President Trump in his re-election bid? What kind of a platform can they run on to compete against the Republicans in the House and the Senate? They have nothing. We just completely eliminated. What are they going to do? Run on re-implementing a federal sales tax, a federal income tax again? Okay? There's nothing that they can run on. And as everything continues over to the 2022 midterms and the 2024 president, there will never be, as long as the Republicans keep the financial responsibility and maintain everything as I set it up, the Democrat Party is finished. Only the extreme, radical, left-wing, liberal socialist would vote for a Democrat after that. So that's what I'm talking about. The destruction of the Democrat. Now, I'm not doing this to destroy the Democrat Party. I'm doing this to build my country. But after I started thinking about it, what are the Democrats going to be able to campaign on? Absolutely nothing. They'll have no platform. They're going to get out there and talk about what? And the Democrat Party will just... They'll have to concede that they're no longer viable for anything. But folks, what we need to do is we don't need to think about, well, I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about taking care of my country. So I ask you for your support. Like and share this with your friends. Go talk to the news media. Put somebody, mail this to Fox News and CNN and MSNBC and say, hey, listen to this guy. He's going to freaking destroy the Democrat Party. But more important, listen to this guy because he's going to take care of this country. I thank you for your time and listening. Think about it. It's common sense.